Does it seem like military coups are taking place more often these days? Let's talk about it and connect those dots. Welcome everyone to the Lofi Poli Sci podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pickering. That's right, Lo-Fi as in low fidelity, low quality, in your face, messy as can be global news show. And today, we're connecting the dots. A follow-up to yesterday's special episode on the military coup in the country of Chad that happened this week. For those of us that pay attention to what's going on in the world today, it most certainly seems like military coups are happening much more often lately. Which is odd because many of us, and by us I mean human beings, we'd like to think that coup d'etats are a thing of the past from a bygone era. And yet, here we are, with 2 already this year, and we're only in April. So let's start with, what is a military coup, or a coup d'etat? In short, it's the toppling of a government by the military. And any time the military takes power from whomever is controlling the country. Simple as that. A military coup can happen against a military government, a different authoritarian government, or a democracy. It doesn't matter. Coups can happen anywhere, anytime. Or so it seems these days. So let's mention 5 of the most recent and well-known cases from the past few years. Let's start with Egypt. In 2013, the military overthrows the democratically elected government and takes power. And then later that same general retired, ran for president, and won. And he's still president today, even won re-election, go figure. And people say Egypt's a democracy. 2014, Thailand, a military coup took place. They held power until 2019. Had elections. The leader of the military gets elected and becomes prime minister. He's still in power today. And they call Thailand a democracy. 2017, Zimbabwe, longtime president for life, Robert Mugabe, was overthrown by a military coup. And they put in place not a military general this time, but rather a person almost exactly like Mugabe, which Zimbabwe was not a democracy before and most certainly is not one today. And Mugabe's replacement is still in power today. 2019, Sudan had a military coup to overthrow longtime non-democratic leader Omar al-Bashir. The military took over. Mass protests took place. Generals resigned, and eventually a power-sharing arrangement was made with a military council, but combined with a few civilians. But the country is still led by the military today. It's supposed to be transitioning to a civilian council next month. But after 2 years, the military is still in power. And we'll see how that transition goes. 2021, in February, in Myanmar, the military overthrows the democratically elected government, institutes a military junta, or council, whichever you like to call it, and they severely are repressing all protesters. They say they'll transition back to democracy at the end of the year, or next year. But yeah, we'll see how that goes too. So we have 2013 Egyptian coup, and today, country is led by the coup leader. 2014 Thailand coup, and today, the country is led by the coup leader. 2017 Zimbabwe coup, and today, the country is led by the person the coup leaders handpicked. 2019 Sudan coup, a military council still leads the country. 2021 Myanmar coup, still fresh, and most certainly, the country is still ruled by the coup leaders. That's 5 military coups in the past 8 years. And in every single situation, the people who led the coup, or those that the coup leaders picked, are still in power today. 5 military coups in 8 years. And what has anyone done about any of it? The short answer? Very little, mixed with a bit of not a damn thing. A few sanctions here, some finger-waving there, a few UN resolutions condemning the coups. And then, life moves on. In fact, even democracies that are first waving fingers and pointing sanctions, and yes, I phrase it that weirdly because democracies' behavior in these situations are quite weird in and of themselves. But even the democracies of the West that condemn these older coups like Egypt and Thailand, those democracies are back working with the coup leaders, and it's business as usual. So really, when I say, or when I ask, what has anyone done about these coups and the overthrowing of democracies around the world? And my answer is, not a damn thing. I mean it. Western democratic countries initially jump on the 24-hour news cycle when these things happen, condemn them, and then move on very quickly with the rest of the news cycle, and forget that globally, democracy is in decline. Freedom House, 15 years straight now. Global freedoms are disappearing. And if you think the world doesn't notice this, oh, they most certainly do. Coup leaders in Myanmar and in Chad this week are fully aware that Western democracies like the US and France are currently doing business with and getting cozy alongside Egypt and Thailand, even though their countries are led by coup leaders that overthrew democratically elected governments. And when the Myanmar military sees that, they say, hey, that can be us. And in fact, the military junta already came out and said they could weather the storm of Western sanctions. And they say this because they're looking at Egypt and Thailand and increasingly Zimbabwe and Sudan and noticing the West doesn't really care who runs those countries. The military in Chad has seen all of this. And they say, hey, that could be us. And wouldn't you know, Chad makes the 6th military coup now in 8 years. So we've just connected quite a few dots. Let's do a few more and answer a question that we left off on yesterday. Why are the US and France sending their condolences for the president of Chad, who was a horrible, oppressive, autocratic dictator for 30 years who didn't care about his people and stole every bit of power and money from the country of Chad that he could? Why would the US and France do that? And really, it's rather simple. And we already answered it in between yesterday's explanation of the cover story the military is using, that the rebels killed him in battle, mixed with the pattern of Western democracy's behavior after coups settle down in a country that we've already talked about today. The West is setting up the new government in Chad, be it military or whomever, but they're setting them up to be the next Egypt and Thailand. Inevitably, what will happen is that Western governments will do some finger-pointing and sanction-threatening for just a few minutes about military coups being bad. And then the news cycle will keep rolling, and eventually, they'll start doing business again with whomever is in power in Chad. Period. The West is getting ready to perpetuate the cycle, and Chad's military is the latest military to take advantage of the obvious pattern of Western behavior around the world. Authoritarian countries and militaries across the globe see that Western democracies' concerns with universal human rights and democracy are grossly superficial. And because of that, the military in Myanmar can say, we'll weather the storm of sanctions. And the military in Chad can make up some lame story about the president dying in battle so they can take over the country. And in both places, they know eventually the West will come back and do business with them. Thus, globally, democracy continues to decline because developed Western countries don't help out developing democracies. And generally, they'll do business with anyone. Because business, economics, and money, well, that's something the West is fiercely concerned with. And in that concern, they'll sleep with anyone. They just wave that little finger and point some sanctions a little bit first before they do it. Military coups are happening more frequently these days because we're letting them happen. And that, my friends, is connecting the dots. Issue 3 of Letters of the Lofi Poli Sci comes out on Saturday. Get on the emailing list now. Send in your top 10 list ideas. Do you have good news to share? Share it with us. Interested in being a co-host? Interested in a flashcast, live stream, episode takeovers? Always remember that Lofi Poli Sci is more than just me. It's the we that we be. Peace and well-being to all my human beings out there. Much love and always the best. Pickering, signing off.